The first question is, do you recommend probiotics? And what about digestive enzymes? So that's basically, do you recommend probiotics? And what about digestive enzymes? That's really two questions there. Then the second question is, what about statins? Do you recommend statins for some people? Number three, what about gluten? Should we eliminate gluten from our diet? And if someone has really sensitive stomachs, should they go further than gluten? Should they also eliminate quinoa and millet, even though they don't have gluten, just because some people say, I don't know what they say, but sometimes people say eliminate quinoa and millet also. I'm not sure exactly why. And then number four, at this conference, everyone says to eat fruits and vegetables. And then Brian Clement from Hippocrates Health Institute says, look, he's been studying fruit for all these years under the microscope. It's feeding yeast, mold, fungus, sugar, candida, and cancers. And therefore, even though every single health person says eat fruits and vegetables, he's saying actually fruit you have to be careful with and shouldn't eat it that liberally, or got to be careful. So on those four things, if you could give us your thoughts.
Okay,
I guess I'll start off. Oh, go ahead.
Oh, okay. Well, I can take the first question about probiotics and digestive enzymes. So the GI guidelines, GI Society does not recommend routine use of probiotics. You know, I feel that with probiotics, we kind of take a swing and we go from one end to the other end. So there was a time period where I think a lot of us, and myself included, we were routinely giving probiotics for people. This is before we had a lot of research. And we did see that some of our patients were getting better on it. But the research has shown that there really is not significant improvement in patients when they take a probiotic. In fact, there's actually some research to suggest that probiotics can be harmful at times. Probiotics are not FDA approved. We're not sure exactly what's in it. You know, we are learning so much about the gut microbiome at such a rapid rate, but we are still not at a point where we understand and know what strains of probiotics, the quantity of the gut microbes are needed. So, you know, at this time, I don't recommend routine use of probiotics. If my patients are taking it and it's helpful, I think it's okay to continue. But if it's not helping, I think you're probably wasting your money on it. And instead, I focus on the prebiotics, which you can get in your vegetables, fruits, whole grains. So focusing more on the diet aspect. And in terms of digestive enzymes, you know, this gets a lot of media press right now, but they're really, again, we don't have good guidelines to recommend routine use of digestive enzymes. Now, if you have pancreatic insufficiency, chronic pancreatitis, then we have ways to test to see if your pancreas is working. And if it's not working, then those are the patients that I would give pancreatic replacement. But I don't routinely give it, and the guidelines do not recommend routine use of these things.
Thank you.
What do you want to do, Baxter? You go.
Sure. Again, we have patients coming with GI problems. I've used probiotics and prebiotics and digestive enzymes, but I guess I'll stop tomorrow after this conference. The fruit issue, you know, I think Brian Clements has a point, and I think it applies not only to fruits, but to all of our food. And we have to be mindful of where our food comes from. And so the answer to the question, do you allow the consumption of fruit? It really depends. And sometimes I will start a patient on a nutritional raw detox, and let's say they're diabetic and they have a sweet tooth, et cetera. And just because I'm restricting their diet in many ways, I will liberalize fruit at the beginning and then remove it not at the end, but later on. And then sometimes I'll remove it at the very beginning. But I think the fruit that we're exposed to, for instance, you know, organic grapes without seeds, organic watermelon without seeds, I mean, these are very likely GMO fruits. And so, again, I haven't studied the biochemistry of it as much as Brian Clements has, but I think he has a point. And we do see clinical benefit when we make adjustments in a patient's diet. Some people may have, systemic, fungus or whatever the case is, and so they may need to be off of fruits, on a low glycemic index fruits at the very least. So I'm mindful of the fruits, and I'm strategic in terms of how I prescribe them. And I'm mindful of the fact that fruits are often, many of the fruits are GMO, and I'll recommend organically grown berries and that are low glycemic index fruits. I recommend fruits that have their seeds in them when I do recommend them. Regarding statin drugs, again, it's only an as needed basis. I've a lot of patients I take off statins, even if they have a history of coronary disease, if they're following the proper food prescription, and if their biomarkers are coming down, et cetera. In our study, some of the data I showed you, we see cholesterol going down by 23% in just 4 weeks. We see LP(a) going down by 16% in just 4 weeks, and even more over time. Statins, by the way, do not drop lipoprotein(a). And we see other parameters, inflammatory markers, going down as well. So we've been able to achieve in our approach the same thing or even greater with the reduction of statins. And there's some trials where the Jupiter trial in particular, where they saw an increase in the diagnosis of diabetes or insulin resistance in patients on statins for a long period of time. So yes, statins can be useful, especially if someone doesn't want to comply with an optimal nutritional diet. But I'm very strategic in how I prescribe these medications, as I am with the food. Gluten, we try to avoid gluten. Our nutrition center is completely gluten-free, even though there's a small percentage of people with the formal diagnosis of Crohn's disease. We have a number of patients who just don't tolerate gluten for whatever reason. And I think it may have a lot to do with how our wheat is grown. I'm not sure, but we just try to avoid it. I'm not sure if anybody's died of gluten deficiency ever, so I think it's safe to avoid it, just to be on the safe side. I think.
Thank you.
Doc Laster, you got something?
I do. I'll talk. I will piggyback on Dr. Pasricha talking about not recommending digestive enzymes. And the other thing I'll tell patients about probiotics is we have no idea if what they said is in the probiotic is actually going to make it to your small bowel to actually have any effect. The one thing I'll say about gluten-free diets, I think, is sort of twofold. I don't recommend sort of routines patients to be off of gluten. I think I do a deep dive into sort of patients who need to be on a gluten-free diet, which are those that have a wheat allergy or have celiac disease. And the reason I do that is because most commonly people with IBS will come in and say, oh, I've taken these things up, I've become restrictive, I've gotten off of a gluten-free diet. But what that means is you have to break that down, because it often means that they've gone down the gluten-free aisle of the grocery store and they've picked up a bunch of processed foods that are all labeled gluten-free on the front of the label. And what that means is that, so now they think, oh, I'm perfect now, but why do I still have symptoms because I'm gluten-free? The celiac was stated, they do not have a wheat allergies. But like I talk to my patients it's not most likely the gluten isn't your issue. It's all the other crap that was in the processed food, all the emulsifiers, all of the additives, all of the other things they add in those foods to sort of make them shelf stable and to make them for the preservatives in them, to make them cheaper, to make them last longer. And so once I'm getting patients off of those sort of processed foods in general, they're able to recognize, oh, actually, when I eat, a chickpea pasta or a lentil pasta or something, or Ezekiel bread, you're right, I can tolerate that. I don't have bloating, abdominal pain, and those symptoms, because I think for most patients, it's not necessarily the gluten itself. It's really the other way we process breads and those sort of things here, with everything being degerminated. I think it's a lot of the processing and all of the processed foods and a bunch of, the foods that we eat in general, more so than gluten. Commonly, I'll have patients that say, you know what, I can eat pasta when I'm abroad, but not when I'm in the US. And that's because of the way our food is processed here. It's not sort of something that's sort of uncommon to hear. That's not surprising to me when I hear that. It's because of the food, the way our food is made and processed. And so I don't routinely tell people they should be on a gluten-free diet. I think patients take that to an extreme and they avoid sort of a bunch of things that are great for our guts and our health and overall health. And so I try to get patients to be on sort of, I sort of go through the detail of explaining what we mean. What is gluten? What's in processed foods? What are those pitfalls that we see on the front of labels? So we go through a lot of painstaking sort of time to talk about food labels. The front of the packet is all marketing, is what I tell them, that everything that says gluten-free, plant-based, vegan, soy-free, all these other things are just marketing ploys, low sodium, all this other stuff, low carb. What's really important is what's on the back. What does that ingredient list say? What is in that actual food? And so so that's sort of my take on gluten, especially as it sort of relates to GI symptoms in particular and overall health and obesity.
And the only thing I add is back to statins. The pressure, number one, we have to recognize every medication has side effects. So statins have side effects, muscle aching, insulin resistance, brain fog. Those are all in the package insert. I use statins when I have to at a very low dose, sometimes 4 or 5 days a week, not daily. But the pressure is that the goal for a heart patient is to achieve a lower LDL. And it's hard even with a really, really good diet to hit those numbers. Used to be LDL cholesterol under 100, then LDL under 70, and now we're going to get new guidelines. The goal is to get LDL cholesterol under 55 to have the lowest risk of future heart attack and stroke. So if you're going to try and help your patient hit those targets, it's going to be a lot of things. It's going to be, the plant-based diet, the portfolio diet and everything, but you're probably going to need to sneak in a little bit of pharmacology here or there to hit a moving target, which is going down.